In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the center rear bumper piece, that's this one right here, on this Toyota 4Runner. Let's get started. I want to remove this fender flare. If you don't have one on your trim of this 4Runner model, then don't worry about this step, but I have it and I have to pull it off of the bumper corner piece. So there's a 10mm bolt here, one here, and there's one on the back side, which I'll show you in a second. Let's pull these off first. There's one. That'll snap right in half. And two. This is the one on the back side. It's actually underneath. Remove this. A lot of times these break, so make sure you have new hardware. There should also be two push clips here and here. Ours are missing, so we can just remove this piece, but if you had yours, you would pop the push clips out with a trim tool and then remove this. There it is. Let's do the same to the other side. These might break. If they do, make sure you have new hardware. This is the one that is underneath. It's kind of in the center, right by the exhaust pipe here. Take this one out as well. There are also two push clips, one here and one here. Those have to come out. Get a trim tool underneath and try to pop them out. A lot of times they break, hopefully they don't. There we go, that one's out. Do the same to this lower one. Perfect. Now you can remove this whole piece. Now let's remove this plastic piece. I prefer to start at one end and work my way to the other. You don't have to, but it's a lot easier to do it this way. The first thing you want to do is pop this corner up. It's got a little tab that sticks into that hole, and then you want to clear this rubber bump stop here for the trunk. And then just take a pry tool, preferably something plastic so you don't damage anything, and just pry up. There are clips along the underneath of this plastic piece. They are pretty tough though, so make sure whatever you're prying with is up to the task. There we go. Okay, just hold pressure upwards on it with your other hand, otherwise it's going to want to pop back in. And there you have it, set it aside. Now let's undo this bolt that connects the center piece of the bumper to this driver's side corner piece. It's a 12mm bolt. There are multiple holding this on, but we'll start here. A lot of times these get fairly rusty. There it is. Let's remove the top bolts that go on the inside of the wheel arch here. They're threaded upwards, so the head is going to be on the bottom. For me, I have to use a 13mm socket. For you, it's most likely going to be a 14mm. Looks like that nut at the top is spinning. I'm going to grab it with some locking pliers. Hopefully that'll allow us to remove it. If you have to do the same thing, just make sure you put them on nice and tight so they don't slip off. Okay, there it is. Underneath the corner of it, right here, you'll see a 12mm bolt. Remove this one. Another 12mm bolt right by the wheel well here. I'm using a 13 because that's what this one is, but it's supposed to be a 12. Take that out. Now grab the corner piece, twist it out, lift it up on the back side, slide it forward, and there it is. Let's do the same to the other side. Now let's remove the bolt that holds the center piece to the corner piece on the passenger side. 12mm socket. There it is. In the wheel well here, you'll see that at the top there's a bolt sticking up and through. We'll have to remove this. I'm going to use a 13mm. For you, it might be a different size. Get your socket on there and remove the bolt. There it is. Now underneath, right on the corner, you'll see another 12mm bolt. Remove that one as well. And one right by the tire. This one's a 13mm for me, but for you it should be a 12. Now, lift up the corner piece from the bottom, slide it up and out from the backside, and then slide it forward, and there it is. Now, let's remove the 2 mounting bolts that go underneath. I'm using a 13mm socket, but it should be 12mm bolts. There's one bolt. And same to the other side. It's still held on up top, so it's not going to go anywhere. This is why I undid the lower bolts first. The last thing holding this bumper on are these L-shaped brackets on either side. You have 2 options for these. You can remove the bolts that hold these onto the body and then transfer these brackets over to the new bumper piece after this is off by removing this bolt on both sides, of course, or just directly remove this bolt from underneath right now, which is the way I'm going to do it, and leave these attached. What that will do is it's more likely to line up perfectly when we go to put the new one on, as opposed to trying to line these 2 up, moving it around and everything. These brackets will already be in place, in position, ready to get the new bumper installed on them. Having said that, these are 12mm bolts, so are these if you wish to remove them. Do the same as the other side. Okay, sometimes these break. Now grab the bumper, slide it off with these brackets. We'll have to transfer these brackets over to the new one, but here it is. To remove these brackets off of the bumper, there are 4 mounting bolts up top and 4 nuts from underneath that I'll show you in a minute. But let's start up here. These should be either 12 or 14mm bolts. Someone has already swapped these out for me, so I have to use a 13mm socket, but just keep that in mind. There's 1, 2. If you have any washers on yours, save them. Most likely the bolt will have a built-in washer. Move over to the next one. There we go. Flip it over. And here are the mounting nuts that we'll have to remove. These should also be either 12 or 14s, but these have also been replaced, so mine are 13. There's one bracket. Set that aside. And the other bracket, set that down as well. And here's your old bumper piece. Now let's reinstall the brackets on the new bumper. Line them up with the studs. I had some washers, so I'm going to put those down. And then my mounting nuts. I'm not going to tighten them yet. I want to put the bolts in first, then I'll tighten everything. Do that to both sides. Okay, flip this down. And put the bolts in from the top. All right, now with the bolts in, I'm going to press this up like that and tighten everything up. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, now they're all tight. So this bracket is done. Hopefully we don't have to loosen it up. Sometimes you'll need some minor adjustments. Once this goes on, you'll have to loosen these up just a little bit, but we should be good to go. Now let's put this side on. Get your washers if you had some. Again, most likely your hardware will have built-in washers, kind of like a flange. Okay, hold this one nice and tight and tighten it up. Flip it over, tighten the nuts. All right, this is ready to go back onto the car. Now take the new bumper with these brackets, slide it on here. Okay, just gonna get it close to being in position. Of course, it has to go a little bit higher. In order for me to make it stay up higher, I'm gonna mount the two corner pieces in, these two that we took out last, and that'll bring it up almost in position lined up with those brackets. Lift up the bumper, slide in this bolt. There's a little bit of an adjustment here, so don't tighten it. Just start it onto the threads. With this in, I'm just gonna tighten it a couple turns so it's a little bit more secure in here. Then we'll go to the other side and do the same thing. That's not fully tightened yet, so now let's put in the 4 main mounting bolts for those brackets. Now let's get the 2 bolts lined up. Make sure they start in smoothly, just like this one. If they have trouble threading in, it's either cross-threading or it just doesn't line up, period. In which case you would want to make the necessary adjustments, whether that is loosening up the other bolts and moving this bracket around a little bit. Like I said, it's not going to be 100% perfect, but it should line up. I'm going to put the other side bolts in before I tighten any of them up, because if I tighten that side and this one doesn't line up, well, I have to loosen it back up. So I might as well just start them all in. And now with all of them started, I know that these brackets are lined up as perfect as they're going to be. So now I can tighten them all down. And tight. To finalize this center piece, let's tighten up the 2 L-shaped bracket bolts that secure the bumper piece on. That's tight. And the other side, tight as well. Now let's put the corner piece in on the driver's side, and it has this bracket that gets a bolt threaded on through the underside of it. And this bracket is supposed to hook up and around this black bracket here. That's how it secures. So start with this, hook it over, pull this back, and then there's a little tab on the other side of it here that secures it to the center piece of the bumper, just so it's properly secured onto the body of the vehicle. I'm going to put this bolt in here. It's the easiest one to reach. I'm not going to tighten it. I just want it on, and I still want this to move around, which is why I'm not tightening it, but this will at least hold it on securely and it won't fall down as I put the other bolts on. Having said that, put the bolt in for this bracket that I was mentioning earlier. This one is a little tricky and difficult to see, but you should be able to line it up easily. There we go. That started on nice and smooth. Again, not going to tighten any bolts until they're all in. So I'm going to leave it like this. It still moves around. Perfect. Next, I'm going to do the lower rear corner. Get the mounting bolt through. Sometimes it's not going to line up perfectly, but you can grab it with a ratchet and extension and just maneuver it into place here. Give it a couple turns to make sure the threads engage smoothly, which they do. Not going to tighten it. Still has a little bit of play. That's perfect. Now for the last bolt, the one that connects the top of the corner to the center part of the bumper. Slide that bolt through and thread it on. And because this is the last one, I know that they're all lined up, so I'm just going to go ahead and tighten it. That's tight. Now let's tighten up the lower rear one. Now moving to the wheel well area, I want to tighten the top one first so that it pulls this whole piece down, lines it up with the body, and then we'll tighten the lower one. All right, that one's tight. And this one on the outside. Perfect. Now let's put this fender flare piece in, line it up, and then I have new hardware because mine broke on this side, but line it up, start it in. Two down here. I'm going to get these a little closer before I put in the last one. There we go. I didn't tighten them yet, just in case I have to move it around. Now the last bolt goes underneath here. Line this one up, and because this is the last one and they're all in, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten it. Okay, now tighten the other two. Our push clips were missing on this side, and I don't have any to put in that'll fit. If you still have yours, go ahead and put them back in. Let's do the same to the other side. Now when you install the corner piece, it has this bracket right here, which gets a bolt threaded through from the bottom, but it has to hook up and over this other bracket. So get that on first, just like that, and then slide it onto the rear. The rear should have a little tab to hold it on. Once that's on, I like to put one bolt in. I'm not going to tighten it, but I just want to put it on so I can hold it safely, secured to the body without it falling off while I put the other three bolts in. Next, I'm going to put the bolt in that goes on the bracket I just showed you. Again, I'm not going to tighten any of them. I just want all of them started so that I know it's all lined up as it should be. Okay, this one's in. Now let's go on the rear lower corner, line up this one, thread the bolt in, get it started. I'm not tightening it, I'm just getting it close. I'm going to leave it right there. I still need this to move around to line up the last one. Last but not least, line up this one at the top corner. Get that threaded on. Threads on nice and smooth. And now, because they're all lined up, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten this one. Now let's tighten up this lower one. Now in the fender well area, I want to tighten up this top one first because this still has some play to it. I want to pull it down so that everything is nice and level first. Then I'll lock in the bumper piece with the lower bolt. That one's tight. And now the last one. Perfect. Now let's put this fender flare back on, line up the bolt holes that go in the fender well, and start them, but don't tighten them yet. You still want this to move around to line up the third one that goes underneath. Perfect. Let's do that one. And line up the one that goes underneath. And since this is the last one, let's just go ahead and tighten them. Nice and snug. And finally the last two. Nice and snug. Our push clips, I don't have any to put in that'll fit. If you still have yours, go ahead and put them back in. Last piece is going to be this one that covers the top of the center piece. Line it up with the striker for the trunk hatch. Tap it down. Make sure all of the little clips lock in. That looks perfect. And there you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.